All right, very good. So let's go ahead and start. Call to order the Policy and Planning Commission for August 12th, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. And tonight we'll be listening to a presentation on the Climate Action Plan Roadmap as presented by the City of Issaquah's Community and Planning Development Director, Minnie Dhaliwal. And due to the virtual format of today's meeting, I'd like to start by providing some guidelines. We have participants attending by computer and others who may be attending by phone. For all meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. State your name each time before speaking. Mute your microphone when not speaking. If having technical issues, try joining the meeting using a different device such as a smartphone or tablet, or use the call information in the meeting invite to call into the meeting. Tonight's meeting is not a hearing, so we will not be putting forth any motions. And now we'll be moving into attendance. Kristen, do you want to go ahead and call roll, please?
Yes, Commissioner Monahan?
Here.
Commissioner Milligan?
Here.
Commissioner Lewis?
Here.
Commissioner Zaragoza?
Here.
Commissioner Voice?
Here, I just had to mute my phone, so that's why I ran away.
Okay, and Chair Fall?
Here.
And Commissioner Bader has an excused absence tonight.
Excellent. Not that she's absent, but excellent that we have everybody here. Okay, for approval of the minutes, we have two different sets of meeting minutes to approve. Let's go ahead and move forward with the approval of the meeting minutes from July 8th, 2021. If I don't hear any corrections, we'll go ahead and approve those meeting minutes. Hearing none, they're approved. For July 15th meeting minutes, are there any additions or corrections for those meeting minutes as well? Hearing none, those are approved. And we'll move on to regular business. So
I have a correction. July 22nd.
July 22nd meeting minutes aren't in this packet, are they? They are. Okay, go ahead. What's the correction?
Thank you, Chair Fall. This is Commissioner Milligan on page 18 of the packet, not of the minutes. I have a correction where it says Nina Milligan asked about increasing residential density, which misleads the reader to think that I was interested in increasing residential density. I have a correction to that phrase that I can put in the chat or email to you that refers rather to why are we increasing residential density when we have all of our residential growth in the Central Issaquah plan? So how can I send that to you?
You can send that, actually send it by email, please.
By email. Yes, ma'am. It'll be just what I just said. So I'll email it to you. Thank you. That's it.
Okay, and I need to make a correction. So there are three sets of meeting minutes to approve, the July 8th, the July 15th, and then the July 22nd. And so with Nina's corrections, are there any additional corrections that need to be made to the July 22nd meeting minutes? Hearing none, they're approved. And okay, so we're going to go ahead and hand the floor over to Kristen and Minnie for their presentation tonight.
Actually, this is Kristen Leeson, Senior Planner. We have Megan Curtis Murphy with us tonight, and she is going to be giving the presentation. So I'll hand it over to Megan. Megan, I just made you the presenter.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and share my screen.
Excuse me, I just got a comment and it's correct on the agenda. We now have public comments in the beginning. So we need to do public comments first. That's new this week.
You're on mute, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, I'm talking to myself. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and open the meeting up for public comment then. Kristen, is there anybody waiting for public comment this evening?
No one's hand is raised, but if you would like to speak, either raise your hand, your virtual hand, please, or press *3, or I'm sorry, don't do that. Type in the chat and let me know. No, it seems no one would like to speak right now. Or you are muted, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we're closing public speaking. And now the presentation is going to be delivered by Megan Curtis Murphy. You have the floor.
Thank you. Just getting my screen set up there. All right. Good evening, commissioners. I'm Megan Curtis Murphy, the Senior Sustainability Coordinator for the city, and I'm here to talk about the city's first ever climate action plan. So the purpose of the meeting tonight is to gain overall familiarity with the plan and provide an update on where we are in the Issaquah Climate Action Plan, or ICAP, process. We'll then review the draft goals and policies from the plan that we're proposing to update the comprehensive plan with. So at this time, the comprehensive plan has one main goal with 10 supporting policies on climate, and we are recommending to update and replace them with 6 goals and about 20 policies that we'll be reviewing this evening. So first, for a little background on the development and inputs that are going into the plan. So last July, the community convened and put forward a list of recommendations for how the city and community should address climate change. The first of that was developing a climate action plan, which we're doing now. The city is also leveraging much of the planning work that we've already done through the Mobility Master Plan, Sustainable Building Action Strategy, and the Park Strategic Plan. And last, there are lots of local and regional partners with resources and tools that we're using to help inform the plan. So what we're doing now is making the plan specific to our city, our population, our building types, businesses, and land use patterns to develop a framework to reach our climate goals. We're working with Cascadia Consulting on this effort to gain further expertise and insights from a firm that has worked with several other cities in the region as well. So here's an overview of the engagement plan. So we started internally with city staff and then moved to boards and commissions and the community as a whole, with the community convening on climate that we had just at the end of July. PBC Chair Ron Fowle and Commissioner Jason Boyce attended, along with other boards and commission chairs and vice chairs. We also had 2 focus groups just this week, and one with representatives from the business community and one to help us center equity in the plan. We also have a survey that is currently open right now. We have about 161 responses already, but it's still going to be open for another week or so. So I encourage other people to fill it out. So although we've made some changes to the goals and policies from this community input thus far, PPC is also a part of this process. So we want to make sure we hear from everyone in order to incorporate all the feedback into that final plan. So before we get into the goals and policies, I want to start with a little background on the risks that climate change poses to Issaquah and other surrounding communities. The first is rising temperatures, which I know we are all feeling right now. The combination of warmer temperatures with longer periods of extreme heat mean we'll have more severe heat waves and droughts like we experienced in June, as well as in these few days here. Increased heat will impact public health with higher rates of illnesses, hospitalizations, and death, especially among our most vulnerable populations. Increased heat can also result in damage to infrastructure and more frequent and severe wildfires. The next climate indicator is changing precipitation. The Pacific Northwest is expected to experience rainier winters and drier springs and summer seasons. So in other words, more rain when we don't need it and less rain when we do need it. This results in a reduced snowpack and less snow melt to our waterways, leading to increased flooding in the winters and drier summers, again increasing that risk of wildfires. So the changes in precipitation also bring low summer stream flows and higher stream temperatures, which places risk to our salmon and other aquatic species. Since we're already seeing and feeling the effects of climate change, this plan will include both actions that will help mitigate climate change or reduce greenhouse gas emissions, as well as actions that are focused on adapting to the changes of our climate, like wildfire preparedness for our community. This slide presents a preliminary overview of Issaquah's 2017 greenhouse gas emissions. You can see on the left that electricity, natural gas, and transportation actions will have the highest impact on reducing overall emissions. Overall, buildings make up about 61% of emissions and transportation 37%. Looking at the sector level on the right, commercial and residential energy use should be the primary focus areas, as minimal emissions are coming from industrial operations. Using the 2017 baseline data, we have made preliminary projections to estimate what emissions will look like into the future. The data has been scaled through 2050, assuming emissions will increase as the population, number of jobs, and housing units in the city continue to grow. The business as usual, or BAU line, represents the directions the city's emissions are heading in a no-action future. The BAU projection is adjusted to account for 3 key policies and regulations that have already been adopted at the state and federal levels. This includes efficiency gained through the impact of the Washington State Building Code, efficiency through the impact of federal fuel efficiency standards, and the biggest is the state's Clean Energy Transformation Act, which requires electric utilities to remove coal from their portfolios by 2025 and be carbon neutral by 2030. Thus, to meet our overarching greenhouse gas reduction goals, which are outlined in green here, the city needs to reduce emissions through actions in the Climate Action Plan, representing that bottom orange slice of the wedge. So we're now going to transition into reviewing the goals and policies. So we're proposing 6 new goals, which each have 3 to 5 associated policies. The goals align with the Climate Action Plan's highest impact focus areas, including climate change, overall, buildings and energy, transportation and land use, materials and consumption, natural systems and water resources, and community resilience and well-being. And we'll talk about each of these a bit more on the next slides, and they're also aligned with the attachment that's found in the memo. So I won't read through every policy, but instead highlight a few of the key points of each. The first goal here is our overarching goal on reducing emissions and highlighting the importance of community outreach and education. So this is actually a new goal that we developed since the recent engagement efforts, where we heard from the community a high interest in including education and outreach in the plan. We were planning to include it throughout the Climate Action Plan, but decided to elevate it to this goal level after hearing from the community. The policies include a new overarching GHG reduction target to reduce emissions by 50% by 2030, 75% by 2040, and 95% in net zero emissions by 2050. This overarching GHG emissions reduction target was recently approved by the Puget Sound Regional Council and is slated to be adopted by the King County Council later this year as well. Thus, we're proposing to include this target in our policies to align with the region as well as best available science. The policies also include one on education and one on municipal leadership, which is another thing we heard from the community. The next goal is to reduce emissions from buildings through energy efficiency, electrification, and transitioning to renewable energy sources. The policies include a target to decrease energy use 25% by 2030 and achieve net zero GHG emissions in new buildings by 2030. It also includes a target to have 100% renewable electricity for municipal operations by 2025. Other policies include advancing building decarbonization, reducing overall building energy use through energy efficiency retrofits, and transitioning to more renewable energy sources. And although these are the higher level policies, the Climate Action Plan will also include details on the actions. So overall, we would expect to start with some education outreach and offering programs and incentives with a focus on people who may not be able to afford these technologies or retrofits on their own. The third goal is to reduce emissions from transportation and land use by improving community mobility and multimodal transportation systems. The city already has 2 established targets for this goal area, which we developed through the Mobility Master Plan. The city recommends preserving these 2 policies and referencing them in the transportation element. Other policies include reducing automobile use through shared, active, and public transportation, reducing emissions from automobiles by transitioning to electric vehicles, and developing sustainable land use planning, which we're working with community planning and development on now to incorporate these pieces into the Title 18 update. The next goal is on materials and consumption, and is to reduce waste generation and the emissions that are associated with consumption and disposal of goods and materials. So although our GHG inventory that we saw on the previous slide shows that only 2% of emissions are from solid waste, it's actually a lot more than that. Our city, like most, does a geographic inventory, so it counts for the emissions that take place within our boundaries. However, as we know, there's also a lot of emissions from the stuff we buy, much of which is made overseas. So this goal speaks to that larger source of emissions as well. The policies include a target to achieve zero waste by 2030 by diverting organic and solid waste from landfills. The policies also include improving community waste and disposal systems, reducing overall consumption, and promoting sustainably produced goods. The 5th goal encompasses natural systems and water resource protection and conservation to improve climate resiliency. The policies include a target to achieve 51% tree canopy of a total of Issaquah acreage. Other policies also include capitalizing on the benefits of a strong tree canopy, protecting vital habitats, enhancing resiliency of natural systems, conserving water resources, and improving stormwater management. The last goal is to ensure community resilience and well-being throughout the impacts of climate change. This goal emphasizes that all Issaquah residents will have equitable access to benefits and resources in climate policies. The policies include items like ensuring the city is ready for climate emergencies, climate education in the community, the ability to adapt to impacts, and equitable distribution of climate resources among residents. So now that I've reviewed the goals and their respective policies, I'd like to move into the questions and discussions. The first question that we have this evening is, do these policies align with the land use element in guiding Issaquah's future development? And then also we are curious if there's anything missing here. And before we get into that, I just want to highlight a few of our next steps. So the feedback collected on policies from today's meeting will be incorporated as we continue finalizing the Climate Action Plan. And then the next 2 boxes show the next steps for the Climate Action Plan, and then also separately for the Comprehensive Plan elements and updates. So the Climate Action Plan is continued to be reviewed by the community, as I was talking on the previous slides, as we still have that survey open. We'll be finalizing that and bring it, or not finalizing, we'll be finalizing the draft of the plan for the environmental board meeting on September 15th, and then going to a city council study session on September 28th. And then we'll also be having another convening with the community on October 20th. And then the plan is expected to be adopted in December. The goals and policies that we're reviewing this evening will be incorporated into the comprehensive plan update, which has the public hearing on October 14th, the study session on November 19th, and then final action in December. So thank you for your time this evening, and I'm happy to answer any questions and then go into comments on the proposed goals and policies.
Thank you, Megan Curtis Murphy. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and open it up to questions. I think what might be a good way to break this down is we will start with the 6 goals: climate change, building and energy, transportation and land use, materials consumption, natural systems and water resource, and community resilience and well-being. So maybe breaking it down in, and we'll hit each topic independently for questions and then comments. And then we'll close it out and go down to the next topic in line. And let's go ahead and open it to the floor. Are there any questions about or comments about climate change? Okay. And okay, so looks like we have a question from Commissioner Lewis.
Thank you, Commissioner Joy Lewis here. My first question actually that I want to start with for you, Megan, is I want to make sure I'm reading this right. Right now, when you talk about the current projection of the policy moving through, I don't know if I'm going to bring that slide back up. It looks like it's not coming back to PPC again. However, since it needs to get approved with the comp plan, does that mean that we'll be holding the public hearing on the 14th and seeing it again as it moves through to a more finalized draft?
This is Megan. Yes, that is my understanding. So an opportunity to discuss tonight. And then if then the plan would be to go to the public hearing in October. If PPC wished to see it again, we could also arrange that as well. As we are still working on that public engagement effort, we wanted PPC to be a part of that process and make sure that we're able to incorporate all of that into the goals and policies.
Thank you for clarifying that. That really helps. I really like the addition of the community had put forward on this education. I was disappointed that we didn't see more of that in our packet. I think that it really would be beneficial to actually be talking about the differences between net zero, right? Being able to talk about the difference between carbon neutrality. They're all very different things. And so being able to understand why are we adopting these particular language that has a particular meaning in these sections, I think would be very helpful. So what I was confused about too is the word education, right? Are we spending resources right now on trying to educate people on the basic need for it? Are we educating people on what our planned policies are and are just trying to give more information to the community? I found this A2 to be pretty vague, and I would love to have further clarification as to what exactly the city means, right, in that policy, because there's a lot of wiggle room in that. And personally, what I would like to see in A2 is to actually have a specific mention of saying that they're going to be a commitment to providing resources for the community to implement best practices. So again, I don't know because I wasn't in that meeting. I also don't know if from the community meeting that happened, if there were notes that were able to be sent out of basically summarizing things that happened. I know our esteemed chair and vice chair were there, but without any kind of frame of reference, it was hard for me to know. There wasn't, it would have been nice to have like a link, for instance, that said, hey, here's staff put together a summary, right? Because it would be nice to be all on the same page. We got some comments back in email form that kind of questioned the disparity between what the community felt was being said and how staff came back. And I found that pretty concerning. And so I think in the future, when you're having these public discussions and dialogues, especially, I mentioned this right now because it's all about A2. When we start talking about how we want to educate the community, we need to have really clear guidelines of being able to say, when this happens, then we put out a summary, right? So everyone can agree upon this is what happened, you know? So being able to just have this vague A2, I think is already problematic, though I like it. I think it needs a lot more cleaning up. And what I would say again, I hope that our emphasis is actually going to be on how are we educating and providing resources and grants to community members to figure out how to actually implement these best practices versus an arbitrary education of trying to fight the back and forth political will of, is it necessary? So I don't know if that quite came across, but that's my feedback for A. Thank you.
This is Megan. I'm happy to just respond a little bit to that as well. Yeah, since we are in the kind of public engagement process now, we really want to bring all of that together about what everyone said, and we'll be presenting that back through the process of the climate action plan. So we don't have a specific summary of each of those items written up yet, but that's going to be part of bringing back that information. So we don't want to just have kind of the summary from one of the pieces, but since we've had several board and commission meetings, the convening, the focus groups, we want to bring all of that together and be able to provide that summary. But I agree that that is really important to bring back to help inform kind of that decision-making process. Also great points on A2. This is kind of that policy higher level, so that next level down of actions will be those more detailed pieces. But I would definitely expect that to be definitely some resources for the community rather than just kind of speaking about these things and expecting people to pick it up from there. We'd want to provide those resources for sure. So maybe looking at including some language around that would be good.
Thank you, Megan. I think it's super important that we, I think that a lot of these policies are really great starts. And I think it's going to be really easy to be like, yeah, but I think there needs to be a little more put into really defining what it is that we're meaning by these things to be able to have a clear way to move forward, right? And so right now it's just a little bit fuzzy, and I want to figure out a way to kind of bring it into focus. I also had a comment on, I wanted to add something to the A section, and we had a comment that I believe was made by Anne in our email, and I had already had it on there, so it's always super gratifying when someone else says what you're already thinking. But I was surprised that we didn't see something about a legislative policy. I would love, I think, since we decided to kind of to call it an overarching climate change for A, and we're putting into community education, I think it might be a natural place to put in a legislative policy goal. And when we were doing electric charging vehicles, we had strongly advocated for there to be this this lobbying effort to be able to have the teeth behind the code when looking at being able to have upgrades for current housing. And so being able to have us have advocates in Olympia for resources and to be able to have that kind of stricter code enforcement, I think would be an important policy addition for A. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lewis. Thank you, Megan Curtis. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move on to another question here from Jason. But before Jason goes, I do want to let people know that we will have public comment after our quick discussion here, and then we'll come back for final debate or final comments.
Chair
Okay,
Fall.
Jason.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Commissioner Milligan actually sent a question and comment note prior to Commissioner Voice, but it was accidentally sent just to me. So.
Okay. Commissioner Milligan, you have the floor, but you're on mute.
I know, I've got to change my settings down here. Commissioner Milligan here. Thank you, Kristen. Commissioner Milligan here with, I'm going to kind of bundle a comment with the question so that it has better context. And Megan, what I wanted to get after was the Central Issaquah Plan and urbanization of the Valley Floor. That coming prior to the Climate Action Plan kind of puts, to me, the Central Issaquah Plan challenges it a little bit, because if we think way back, furthermore context, when we talked about growing Issaquah in the 1990s, people said flooding is a bad thing already. Not even talking about how bad it will be in the future. We want all our growth to be up on the hills. Oh no, now we want all the growth to be down on the valley floor because we're going to have mass transit. But the flooding hasn't gone away, and the flooding is going to get worse. And when we think back just to a couple of weeks ago of the issues in urban Germany and how unfortunate that was. So the question that I'm asking, Megan, is how does this interact with the Central Issaquah Plan, and how can the Climate Action Plan cycle back through the Central Issaquah Plan and make some changes that might be necessary in impervious surfaces, setbacks, and things like that? Thank you.
This is Megan. I think I'll start a little bit by kind of addressing the flooding piece. So this plan is trying to consider all the different plans in the cities that either have already been adopted or are in the process of being adopted. So one of those is the Storm and Surface Water Master Plan that has come to PBC and I think will be in the future as well. So Gary Schmick, who is running that plan, is on our internal advisory team for this plan, and I am also on his. So we're trying to make these plans talk to each other. So looking at climate impacts and expected increased flooding, he's considering that through his efforts about whether to upsize stormwater infrastructure or do other sort of ways to mitigate that. So we are looking at all of those plans. As far as the Central Issaquah plan, that to focus the development in the valley floor, I think still aligns really nicely with the climate action plan, pieces of Title 18, wanting to preserve and protect our hillsides and focusing development around transit, I think really gets at our climate goals. So that was a great, I think, earlier piece that, again, like you were saying, wasn't really talking about climate change, but was helping us meet some of those goals. So we want to be doing more of that, but also thinking about those other pieces that we are realizing are more and more issues now, such as that flooding through both this plan and then that stormwater plan.
Great, thank you, Megan. And if I could just follow up briefly, that's really great, everything you said. And I think to just dial it in a little further about what I was thinking about with the Central Issaquah plan is that if I'm remembering correctly, we have a lot of capacity in that is much greater than our growth needs. And so I'm wondering if maybe we could dial that a little closer to our growth needs so that we have less urbanization, still focusing that urbanization in Central Issaquah, 100% in support of that. But I'm wondering if we have room to move because of these issues that we've learned in this new policy. So that's all. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Commissioner Milligan. And so we're going to go back to Jason Voice. Jason, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Fowl. And it is gratifying when somebody else has the same thoughts as you. So 2 quick questions is really to piggyback on Commissioner Lewis. A2 kind of struck me the same way, conduct education and outreach. Ms. Curtis Murphy, you mentioned that this is meant to be kind of a higher level and that the action will actually be a little bit more detailed. I'm just actually more interested, what is the pros and cons of leaving it more vague right now? Because again, I think Commissioner Lewis brought up a good point. You know, if it's going to have some teeth, if it's going to have some real direction, which I think is what people really prefer, is to have clarity, whatever the position is. I'm more interested to know, why is it better to have it vague? I'm not really taking a side about it, more just interested in why the language is vague, A2. And then in A3, it says, lead by example, for municipal operations. Is there a reason why we're not including that citywide? Is that later to come with Title 16? Just interested to know why certain language was used as far as our policy goals. Thank you.
Yes, this is Megan. So for the first part of that, I think it's overall the climate action plan, I guess, is a little bit of a, I was going to say funnel, but I guess upside down funnel, in that we have the overarching goals, our overarching greenhouse gas reduction goal. Then we have each of the goal areas that then each have these policies. And then each policy is going to have a few actions as well. So for example, so I think this one, being able to conduct education outreach, we want to do that in a number of different ways. So the action level will have different ways we'd be doing that. So for example, one thing that I think would be great to have would be to have some sort of like online challenge platform that is able to engage people in kind of an exciting way, but also have resources that can link them directly to how to reduce their own emissions. So if they're interested in reducing their electricity emissions, then it can also then link them to Puget Sound Energy for various resources on that. That sort of online platform isn't going to reach everyone. So we want to make sure that we're doing that outreach engagement in other ways. We want to make sure we're going to meeting people where they are. So that might be out at events and doing outreach on that. We might want to be doing outreach on some areas more than others. So our larger emissions are coming from buildings and then transportation. So we might want to have some targeted outreach campaigns on that, for example. So I think that's what we're seeing here is that policy level, which then we need to have those implementation steps of how we will achieve that. So I think that's overall why that level up is not as detailed as that action level. The second part about the municipal goal to achieve 100% renewable electricity. With this is something that the city has control over, and we also wanted to show leadership in having kind of an earlier goal in having 100% renewable electricity by 2025, whereas some of these other goals are a little bit farther out at 2030. So we want to make sure the city is doing these things and at the same time providing the resources for the community to do it as well, but making sure we take those steps ourselves.
All right, and thank you, Commissioner Voice, and thank you, Megan Curtis. So that leaves me, I've got a question here for climate change as well. I'm not going to beat A2 to death here, but I do have a question about A1, and it says reduce greenhouse gas emissions compared to 2007 baseline by 50% by 2030, 75 by 2040. How do we come up with those goals, and can we change those? Are those up for debate?
This is Megan. So we, as an individual city, we can set the goals that we want to have. These come from regional resources. So as we know, climate change doesn't have specific boundaries, and it's really going to take actions with cities working together in the region with state level policies. So we used to have targets that weren't quite as strong as this, or I guess in our current comprehensive plan, we have to reduce emissions 80% by 2050, for example. The 2030 goal is still the same. But through resources of looking at where climate change is going, where the science is going, there is a need to be doing more to making sure that we are living in a safe place as far as climate change. And so I think these goals were actually adopted at the state level first. The King County cities had goals originally that were stronger than the state, and then the state actually adopted stronger goals. And so the King County cities got together to kind of look at ours and where we're going, and came up with these ones. So overall, I think it makes sense to align with the region for some of the regional priorities that we have, a lot of the collaborations that we have. We bring our elected officials together to work on actions that will help us meet these emission targets. So I think that's the overall reason.
Okay, because I'm in A3, it says lead by example by implementing actions to reduce emissions from municipal operations. Well, to Jason's point, why don't we open that up citywide? But if PSC provides us with the electricity, if PSC as a resident, I can elect to have all my electricity through alternative means, which I do. So technically the city would be free now to hit the 50% mark, right? Provided that we have the ability to do that, meaning that it costs more money for utilities. What's stopping us from working with PSC to say, you know what, let's hit 2050 now?
This is Megan. We have worked with them in the past some. We've had a green power challenge in the past where we've tried to increase the number of residents who are buying green power. So that's something the city definitely encourages, and I could see doing that again through some of those education outreach pieces that we want to do to try to gain more people to do that. But right now, the programs that that would be optional for residents to participate in or not. The programs that Puget Sound Energy has right now for its larger customers, such as the Green Direct program, which is the city is a member of, they are going out and building wind farms and building solar energy farms that their largest customers can buy into. So Issaquah made a policy decision to do that so that we can get our renewable energy for our city operations, but they don't have all of that resource for residents to then go buy into besides that green power program.
Okay, so we're waiting for PSC before we can move forward and increase our or decrease our carbon emissions in terms of greenhouse gas.
And there's some state legislation that is going to be helping with that as well. So in 2025, all electric utilities in the state will be required to remove coal from their fuel mix. So in 2025, our electricity mix is going to be a lot cleaner. Our emissions are going to go down as a result of that. And then they have goals after that, or targets that they need to reach in order to make it even greener. So there is state legislation that's really guiding that will help us get there.
Okay, thank you. I think having the program that reaches out to residents and doing more promotion is certainly key, although I don't think that's part of this conversation because we're too high. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to actually final questions. Are there any more additional questions about climate change? Okay, hearing none, let's move on to building and energy. Are there any questions about building and energy that you'd like to ask? Another second here. And it looks like we have a question from Commissioner Milligan. You have the floor.
I think it's a race to the bottom. None of us want to be first, so we sit there with our hands on the return key, waiting for somebody else to put a cue up there. It really did, and Jason beat me. He won. He got to go second. Commissioner Milligan here, talking about Goal B, buildings and energy. And Megan, I have two topics here to talk about, and they may fall under action. So pardon me if I'm getting too far down in the weeds, but there is a little bit of a question here. And one is has to do with solar for buildings in two parts. One, the municipal leadership that we were just talking about in A, is there a means or is there something that we should tee up here if we want to require all municipal buildings to have solar? Is there something we need to do here more if that's something that we want in the action? And then what would we need here if we wanted to require, let's just say, we wanted to require all new buildings to be solar ready, like we talked about with the EV ready for the cars. Do we have the kind of language in the policy that we would need if we wanted to have that as an action? And then I have one more, but I'll, if I could just come back to the next one after the solar talk.
Sure, this is Megan. So the first one, so requiring all municipal buildings to have solar. I don't think we quite have that at the action level. I think that we have kind of more that that broad language to make sure that we have 100% renewable electricity, but it doesn't specify which technology it will be. So right now, we have a lot of our electricity coming from a lot of renewable electricity coming from both a wind farm and a solar farm through PSE, but our municipal buildings don't have solar right now. It is something that we are working on for some of our buildings, including our community center. In the next couple of years, we'll be redoing that roof and hopefully including solar in that project. So I think that that could fall under that B2 to have 100% renewable electricity, because we're not at 100% yet. So we do need to do more to get there. But we don't have that explicit action. So that's a good idea. The next one for solar ready buildings, I think that would be included would be an action under B5. We'd under that language to transition away from fossil fuels for clean renewable energy. Something like that would fit that category.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Megan. And your answer inspired a refinement of not just that we source renewable energies, but that we actually make them on site and aren't so dependent on the grid. The second one, you'll remember from my following up on the early convening, do we have language in the policies that allow us to require all electric buildings, such as residential development? And the concern we hesitated on disallowing fossil fuel appliances in new residential building like gas stoves. But I still would like to be able to consider pursuing that, especially since a lot of our building that goes on in Issaquah, and especially up in Issaquah Highlands where I live, are national builders. You know, they're not the kind of people that we can educate and change their way. We need to just tell them, no, we don't want any more natural gas in our homes. So is there adequate policy here if we wanted that as an action later?
I think policy B3 to advance building decarbonization would cover several kind of those different levers to do it. It would include actions to do education. It could include actions to do incentives, and it could include actions to do requirements.
Okay, and Commissioner Milligan, are you satisfied with that? Excellent. Okay, and so we'll go ahead and move on to Commissioner Voice. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so this is actually pretty easy. I think Ms. Curtis Murphy kind of explained it earlier in our discussion about climate change. So again, just had a couple questions more about language used. Seemed a little vague, but I appreciate, like I said, what you had mentioned earlier in our previous discussion. So I think it was more of a comment than a question. So that was it. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Commissioner Voice. And we'll open the floor to Commissioner Lewis. You have the floor.
Commissioner Joy Lewis here. So in regards to policy B, Megan, you did touch on the city's use of being able to opt to pay for green electricity from PSE. It's a separate program. I appreciate that the city does that. Without sounding too conspiratorial right now, what I'm concerned about is that right now, not all green energy is clean energy, right? We know that it's much more efficient for a coal-fired plant to be producing electricity than to be able to have coal-fired plant on individual sites, right? So right now, there's kind of this grayscale happening right now where you say, well, it's electricity, but how are we making that electricity, right? And the hope is that with more pressure from municipalities, we're able to give private industry what they need to be able to move more fully that way. So you touched on it a little bit, but I'm curious if we actually need to have more language about things being independently verified, right? By saying that we're going to lead, that means that we know that everything that we're using is coming from a clean source, like wind and solar, and actually having a little bit more in the policy that touches to what we're wanting that outcome to be, rather than just kind of relying on our private partners to be probably sometimes doing it. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but that's in regards to B2. Has there been discussions kind of about that, about how do we make sure on the back end we're getting what we're wanting?
Yes, this is Megan. Specifically for the program that we're enrolled in, the Green Direct program. So as I mentioned, that they open that to their larger either corporate or municipal customers, and it filled up because they are building the specific wind farm and the specific solar farm. I'm forgetting that one is in Southeast Washington. I believe that's the wind. I forget if that's the wind or the solar farm. And then the other one is in Western Washington. And those are sites that we got updates on. We subscribed to the program. They were building them. We got updates all along the way. They were going to do a tour, but it was during COVID. So the parts that we're getting that renewable electricity from, that's definitely from wind and solar and directly from those two sites.
I think that it might be nice to have language in B2 that kind of talks about in some way continuing to partner with public and private sectors to push for it to be, to have what it needs to be able to grow at the scale that we need it to. Maybe is kind of what I'm thinking is we're missing from the policy. And as far as B5 goes, Nina put it much more elegantly than I'm going to, but I would like to see more emphasis in the policy about us being able to generate electricity on site. We know that solar photovoltaics is a clean energy, and so being able to actually subvert all that it takes to get it from the grid to being on site, I think is really important when trying to achieve B5. So the Providence Point School District project is a good example of us basically clear cutting a large area, putting in 2 schools that have the potential to be pretty large solar generators. And so being able to actually put in language in our policy that talks about, hey, like how we're actually going to be doing it, right? When we say we want to transition away from it, by actually then having language in that policy that says, and we're going to require this, right? And so I'm not looking for the same kind of teeth, obviously, that we use in the code, but I'm looking for our policy to get fine-tuned in a little bit of a way that says, and this is how we're going to do it, and this is a part of it, right? And we're going to require this much of it in this type of way, right? It doesn't need to be super sweeping, like all new buildings kind of a thing right now, but I think B5 needs to be beefed up a little bit. And so as you guys are kind of going through this draft and process in the next couple meetings and things like that, I would like to see something that talks about how we have that green power timeline in a more specific way. And like Nina was saying, that solar photovoltaics is a great way to be able to do that. So thank you. Please feel free to comment if there's anything on that last one. If you guys have talked about with B5 trying to expand that a little bit, or I also do think that this is a really good section to be adding a policy that talks about upgrading our public buildings to be net zero emissions. But I think then also one thing that I was hoping to see in our packet was a discussion of basically of whether the city is wanting to adopt more net zero emissions or more climate positive, right? So when we talk about greenhouse gases, are we really trying to have no carbon created and therefore not emitted, or are we looking more at an offset program, right? So to be able to achieve some of these numbers, being able to have our municipal buildings become better aligned, it would be nice to see kind of more of a discussion of where and why we're going with that, and being able to include that in B.
This is Megan. I can respond briefly. I think with B5, I agree. It does have a lot of options in there. I think it doesn't really focus in on one technology or one pathway, but leaves a lot of space for different things. Solar is, one of the main popular technologies right now, but there are other things that that could also come down the line more, whether it's wind power in other places, anaerobic digestion, other renewable sources. So it doesn't have that level of detail that would then be in the actions, I think, or space to be doing those things in the future still under that policy. But I do hear you in that.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Lewis. See, I was next, but I'm going to let Richard Zaragoza go next. So, Richard, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to plus, this is Richard Zaragoza. I just wanted to plus one Nina and Joy's comments about adding language to B5 around generation of energy. I agree. It doesn't necessarily need to be so specific as to one type of energy or another, but certainly generating energy on site is better than even using, buying green energy, but producing it on site, I think, is great language to have in there, as high level as it needs to be. But I +1 that. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Zaragoza. Okay, so I have a question concerning the on-site development of energy. I'm kind of thinking in the policy we should have a analysis portion to determine what is more efficient. Is it more efficient for some municipal buildings to have on-site energy, or will it be more efficient for us to leverage PSC's resources and purchase all of that electricity through their renewable channels? Because they reach economies of scale where if we decide to take like, let's say Providence Point High School and say we're going to have that all based off of solar or wind, then what's the cost associated to that? And I don't see anything here really discussing the cost benefit analysis. And I think that should almost be policy as opposed to an afterthought, because maybe leveraging PSC would be more efficient because and just go through the grid. That way we don't have support costs rolled into that as well. Okay, I don't see any additional questions or comments for Goal B, building and energy. So let's move on to Goal C, which is transportation and land use. I will open the floor up for questions. And we have a first question from Matt Monahan. So Commissioner Monahan, you have the floor.
Excuse me. Thank you. Matt Monahan here. This might be a tangential question, but the HOV lanes on I-90 end, I think, like halfway between Issaquah. Is there any thought to going to the state and exploring extending those throughout the city? And I'm operating under the assumption that HOV lanes have some impact on greenhouse gas. I'm just curious if that's something we've thought about.
This is Megan. I don't know the answer to that. If we've gone and talked with them about that, we do have our senior transportation planner, Stephen Padua, who attends all the regional meetings with each of the transportation agencies and provides Issaquah's voice in that. And here's what's going on, and then can provide input on what we need in Issaquah. As far as the extending those lanes, I do not know exactly. But yeah, if people are able to get where they're going more efficiency and less traffic, that can have greenhouse gas emission reduction benefits. However, I think also we want to be shifting people out of their cars in general. But if we have 2 people in a car rather than 2 single drivers, that would definitely be more beneficial.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Monahan. And Commissioner Lewis, you have the floor.
Thank you, Commissioner Joy Lewis. To go off that point you just made, Megan, it's been something we've been talking about with the transportation plan for a long time, is how to have this multimodal approach, right? But I think it's interesting when we talk about C1 is to think about how pandemic behaviors are going to affect this timeline. I can speak personally. I haven't ridden on public transit in a year and a half as somebody who is an ardent supporter of it. And I most certainly am not making a plan to do it anytime soon, right? So how does that actually affect what we're looking at on a time scale, right? So a big part of this policy is we're trying to set both achievable and lofty goals. So how has that changed anything, right? How has pandemic behavior kind of changed how we're ride sharing, right?
This is Megan. Those things are fascinating, and I think there's a lot of people collecting data on that now, because there's the pros and the cons. So like you said, there's a lot of people not using public transportation, but there's also a lot of people who aren't driving to work anymore and who are teleworking now. And there's a lot of companies starting to institute policies around that. There'll be lasting policies. It's not just a COVID policy. So I think that there's kind of gains and losses from it. And I am very excited to see kind of all the regional data on that as they put together all those traffic modeling.
I'm curious, for C2, I'm curious if we could say something about something like with a strong, like a city investment in charging infrastructures. When I read it, I think it's easy to be like, yeah, but knowing the history as I do, right? We sat in this very, WebEx environment, trying to push for the basics of just having infrastructure, right? Not even stations and charging stations. And the city likes to tell us this is a start, right? This is what we can always change it. We're dipping our toe in, right? And we create a policy that says that we're proponents of it. Yeah, we need to have it, but do we have the necessary things in line to be able to support that policy? From where I'm sitting, we don't right now, right? So I'd like to see stronger language in that that then helps us when we're actually doing electric vehicle charging to be able to say, hey, here's our policy. We specifically say that, for instance, the city is going to invest in charging infrastructure, right? So, that we can require this on these different ways and levels. So I do think that C2 could use a little more gravitas in my opinion, but that's just my C feedback. Thanks, Megan.
Okay,
I'll
thank
say
you.
again, this is Megan. Sorry. Yeah, and I think that that's a great example, and that is an action that we are going to be including in that, the city investment in it. So I think again that gets to that action level. So the city won't just be investing in EV chargers, but we might also be buying electric vehicles for our fleet as well. So there'll be kind of a few different actions under that level that will help us overall transition towards electric vehicles. And I will say hearing those action levels is also really helpful in this conversation, because that is the process that we are in right now. We have these goals and policies here, and we're listening to the community right now on those actions. So I'm happy to have those and are writing those down as well.
And thank you, Commissioner Lewis. And Commissioner Milligan, you have another question.
Thank you, Chair
You have the floor.
Fall. Thank you, Commissioner Milligan. Again, thank you, Megan. I wanted to talk about C3. And again, not a new topic from me, but when we talk about reducing vehicle miles traveled, I'm often looking at our residential planning from the 70s that were very car dependent, and the land uses have not changed. And I'm going to harken back to something that we use in another context, and that's food deserts. These places where there isn't any food and people have to get in a car to go to the grocery store. Well, people who live on Squaw Mountain, people who live in South Cove, people who live in Providence Point, even people who live in some parts of Issaquah Highlands have to get in a car to take care of any daily services. And it's an unfortunate land use zoning policy. So I was hoping to pitch an idea for C3 that would add some sort of language that would talk about, and here's my hack at a policy language, but something that would say something like selectively insert micro commercial retail zones in residential areas that need it. Now, you're the policy writer, so you could make that lovely. But I think, again, also to another inspiration for this is the 15-minute city. That's the standard by which I'm looking at, is that people need to have their regular needs served within walking distance of their home, which is generally thought of as a half mile. And if it's not a coffee shop, I don't know what it is, but that's my daily need. Coffee shop within 15 minutes of everybody's house. That's the policy. Kidding. I think you get where I'm going though, right, Megan?
I do, yes, thank you. And I have a request from the public to put the presentation up, so I will just let people know I'll put up the slides that we're talking about.
Okay, and thank you, Commissioner Milligan and Curtis Murphy. So I'm going to go ahead and open the floor to Richard Zaragoza once more.
Thank you, Chair. Richard Zaragoza. So it's kind of a comment, kind of a question on telecommuting. I think, it's an amazing way to get people away from their cars. And I kind of want to attach that to what Nina just said about food deserts. Maybe not moving the stores to the neighborhoods, but I think the Highlands had a shuttle for a little while that was planned to help people come down from the top of the Highlands down into the retail areas. I think some kind of shuttles that would help these kind of hillside communities get downtown easier, faster, or even to their supermarkets quicker, so they can kind of walk the few blocks to the shuttle and back. On top of that, having infrastructure, I don't know if that's 5G or if it's centers for work or something like that, but is it possible for the city to maybe do some investigation on it first, whether it is actually a positive, but do the research on telecommuting, and is this something that we could support as part of our reduction in use of automobiles by essentially promoting stay-at-home work or affecting that in some way. Thanks.
This is Megan. I think this is another great example of kind of some of the different plans that we have in the city that are talking to each other through this process. So the mobility master plan is one of those, and they through that implementation, they've been talking about, if we want shuttle systems for some of those hillsides communities to get people down, and as well as working to get people out of their cars. We've had programs in the past looking at kind of bigger employers and helping them reduce their footprints. So I think that's another great idea.
Hi, if I could jump in, this is Kristen Leeson, Senior Planner, and I two things wanted to note. We actually have a policy in our comprehensive plan that says to put neighborhood services, allow for neighborhood zones to have neighborhood services in there. And it's something that's been talked about off and on. I think it's something that'll be addressed probably again fairly soon with Title 18 or shortly thereafter. Another topic was the shuttles. We actually worked with Metro for a few years and did surveys and all sorts of studies and came up with a shuttle program sort of that we had that was going to be put into place, and the Metro lost their funding. So hopefully that comes back, because it was going to go on Squawk Mountain and Talus. And so because that's something that's been asked for years. So hopefully that will come back and we can get that going again.
Thank you, Commissioner Zaragoza and Megan Curtis Murphy and Kristen. Okay, and I have one last question here regarding, and by the way, I want to ditto Richard Zaragoza on his comment there. I think to maybe build upon that, almost like an internet cafe, like the library is becoming sort of that internet cafe, and maybe having that open so that people can work from home that may not have the resources at home, or that can afford high-speed internet to be able to do some of those things, but have a computer, maybe having a room set aside that allows people to be able to come in and use the Wi-Fi in a semi-private environment and be able to do video conferencing might be a good idea, something to look at. But I really want to get on to what I'm not seeing that I would like to see added to these policies is something that embraces the walk and roll strategy. I know the walk and roll strategy is part of the Green Necklace. It's its own policy, so to speak, but it's not in this document here putting any kind of emphasis on it. We're talking about getting people out of their cars. Well, bike paths, bicycles, bike racks, walking trails to shopping destinations, I think are a great way to do it. I would rather walk to the store or ride a bicycle to the store. But if I did that, then my bicycle would probably be stolen because there's no place to lock them up. And then some people also say that some of the roads around here are not safe to ride. So having that policy that embraces walk and roll strategy, that makes people feel safe, that encourages them to leave the car behind. Public transportation is not necessarily an option for me because it doesn't exist. I can get on the bus, but the bus takes me to the bus station, not the grocery store. So I'd like to see maybe some policy added that says something about local travel using the walk and roll strategy. Okay, that's all the questions.
This is Megan. I have a follow-up question for that, actually. So I think that C1 policy is where we're trying to get at reducing overall automobile use by advancing shared. So that's, carpooling or van pools. Active would be walking, biking, and public transportation modes. So I have a question on that. Does that capture that, or do you think there needs to be more explicit language there to capture that we're trying to kind of transition to some of those other alternative modes?
I don't know what advanced shared means. Active, now that you mention it, it does sound like, that bike could be, bike and walk would be part of that active, but maybe changing the language so that's more descriptive or prescriptive would have helped me because it's C1's a little ambiguous otherwise.
Great.
And Commissioner Zaragoza, did you have another question?
No, it was just a thumbs up to agree that active could definitely be iterated on a little more. I'd love to, like you said, see some more bike lanes and safer ways to bike to stores and things like that. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you,
May-
Commissioner Zaragoza.
May I jump in one more time? This is Kristen Leeson, Senior Planner. Excuse me. We have a policy in or a goal in our comprehensive plan that says provide safe and comfortable streets that encourage people to travel by walking, bicycling, and transit. So if Megan were to refer to that policy instead of duplicating policies or sort of duplicating policies, does that work?
Yeah, I would say so. I don't want to duplicate policies. I want to make this as easy as possible, but have a cross-reference to it. Yeah, that would be fine. In my opinion, I think that'd be fine.
Okay.
Okay, we have a question from Commissioner Milligan.
Thank you, Chair Fall. Yeah, Commissioner Milligan here again, and thank you for bringing that up, Chair Fall. I just want to add, in the same way that Kristen did about the comp plan, the mobility master plan, and I don't have it memorized, but I did work on it for 2 years, and recall that we were very focused on these mobility options that go somewhere, that they were destination oriented, and we created a map of places where people had to go. So to Chair Fall's point, it doesn't just take you to a transit center, it takes you to where you have to go, your school, your work, your shopping. So there might be another reference here that could not duplicate, but leverage the mobility master plan. That's all.
Hi, it's Kristen again. So the mobility master plan, because some of you weren't here for that, the mobility master plan goals and policies are our transportation plan. Our transportation element. So everything that was adopted in that as far as goals and policies are also in here. So if Megan references one, she's referencing the other. Yeah. So we can just make sure that any necessary references are there. How about that?
Good points. Thank you. Okay, not seeing any additional questions or comments. Let's move on to the next goal here. Goal D, materials and consumption. So let's go ahead and open the floor to questions or comments. And first commissioner is Joy Lewis. Congratulations.
Thank you, Chair Fall. Commissioner Joy Lewis here. I thought I'd take the hit this time. My question is actually, first of all, I want to start by saying, Megan, that I love that we have this, right? Obviously, when we're doing our climate action plan, greenhouse gases are a big focus, but looking at environmental policy is a much bigger scope. So I want to say thank you for this section. I was very happy about it. I think it's a crucial part of how we interact in our space as a community. And so for D1, I'm curious, is there a current waste output evaluation metrics that we know right now? Is like how much waste are we generating as a community? And if so, is those numbers going up in the same way that our energy consumption has been going up?
This is Megan. Yes, we do track our waste diversion on an annual basis. So right now, we break it out by sector. So we have single family, multifamily, and commercial. Single family is the highest, and don't quote me on these exact numbers, but they're in the right ballpark. Single family is around 60%, multifamily around 27, and commercial around 23. When you put all that together, our overall diversion rate is around 40% of materials are diverted. We track that from our waste hauler provides us those reports on those numbers. And so that's one of our city's performance measures that we report on annually.
I'm curious then, I'm really glad that we have that data going into it because that's super important. To be able to achieve zero waste, I'm curious if we are wanting to break it apart by percentage, right? Is there a way that we want to say, to get to this is how we need to do it, right? To be able to say, since there's this much percentage here, then by this date, we need to have it reduced to this amount, right? The same way that we have in other places in the document. And again, I get that those other percentage points were guided by state and county numbers that were already kind of being done for us. But I'm curious if there was a discussion about in this section of saying how do we, to get to where we want to be, how do we do that?
This is Megan. So this number is overall saying that we want to have zero waste of resources by 2030. So anything that can be, we want to be reducing our waste first. Anything that can be composted, anything that can be recycled is going that way. So previously the goal was to have 70% diverted, and now it's to have everything that's possible. There's still some things that are always going to be garbage, but everything that's possible and has resource and value would be diverted.
So has there been talk about things like bringing back like the at workstation that was formerly by the Safeway that went away, like being able to bring back more like community centers of places for encouraging other ways of being able to deal with waste. I mean, how I'm curious to kind of, I know I'm cart before the horsing a little bit, but to kind of hear those actions that you guys are talking about, because I think it's interesting looking at these policies. For me in this section, it feels a little more ominous, like, okay, well, how are we going to do that, right? So if there's some way to kind of bake in a little bit of saying, and we'll be doing it with these different tools, right?
Mm-hmm. This is Megan. So I think some of that can be done at the local action level. Some things that come to mind is wanting to have more repair cafes. So instead of people throwing out their blender, they're bringing it to a repair cafe, getting it fixed. That was something we actually had scheduled in the city, but got canceled due to COVID. I remember those days, but we'll bring it back again. So the actions would be encouraging things like that. Maybe actions around circular economy. So being able to produce things in the city that then also have their are turned into new resources in the city. So for example, food waste being either composted or going to an anaerobic digester would then produce renewable energy in the city. So having those sorts of local things. Not everything will be able to be handled locally, though. King County has some staff that works on recycling market development. So, for example, some kind of harder to recycle items include like mattresses and rugs. So those are items that are being worked on more at a regional level. But through this local level, we would want to make sure that we are providing the information and resources to residents so that they know how to properly recycle those items.
Fantastic. I'm sure that there's a better way to put it, but I wish that that we were able to specify that a little bit more in D1, right? And some way to be able to have it feel like see a little more strategy in the policy, maybe. I'm also wanting to see a policy, which would be like a D4 effectively, that would talk about how municipal waste management is going to be leading the community, right? So being able to say, we have, expectations in our community, and the city is going to lead that by saying we are going to have an aggressive plan for our own waste. I would like to see that specifically called out as well for D. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you, Commissioner Lewis. Are there any additional questions for materials and consumptions? Not seeing any, so let's go ahead and move on to the next goal, which is Goal E, Natural Systems and Water Resources. And we'll go ahead and open the floor. Okay, and Jason, you have the floor.
So Commissioner Lewis bit the bullet last time, so I will this time. So I think this might actually kind of speak to what Joy had just mentioned, maybe possibly another category. And we saw it in quite a few emails, I believe. I can't remember the name, but maybe making it a priority that part of this tree canopy that we're developing, trying to achieve our 51%, might actually prioritize rivers and streams to allow the salmon's eggs. I don't know the technical term, but prioritizing where we try and put that investment. There's a few other things mentioned, but again, I know we're kind of looking at the higher view right now, so I'm not going to try and get into that. But I would say one for maybe another policy goal would be to prioritize some of our developing tree canopy to also take it like, two birds, one stone type thing. So prioritizing where we plant these trees to ensure the continued health of our rivers and streams.
Thank you, Commissioner Voice. Next person here is Commissioner Zaragoza. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Zaragoza, my question, I think it's definitely important prioritizing where canopies are going. I totally agree that having them around streams is super important, but also species choice, right? This is a question, I don't have an opinion either way, do we prioritize species that are local, that are natural to the environment, or do we prioritize species that have gains in carbon capture and things like that, or that they grow faster so that we can capture more carbon over a shorter period of time? Of course, there are going to be other issues, as environmental issues if we do that. But I think, there's kind of two goals there, right? Keeping, our environment local and the environment kind of the way we want it to be, the way Issaquah should look, because we have certain kinds of trees, perhaps. But also, certain species have huge advantages, I think, when it comes to carbon. So curious if there's been discussion or thoughts around that. Thanks.
This is Megan. Yes, that's something our Parks Department does a lot of work on, making sure we're doing the right trees in the right places. And with the changing climate, there are some tree species that aren't doing as well, that used to do better here. So making sure they're paying attention to that. And the second part of that, making sure that they're maintaining them and keeping them healthy. So there's the Green Issaquah Partnership, which is a new program where the city is helping to train forest stewards. So they're going out and removing invasives and making sure that the trees are staying healthy. But yes, making sure that we have the right species for a changing climate.
Okay, and thank you, Commissioner Zaragoza. Commissioner Milligan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Fall. Commissioner Milligan here. I have a quick question and then a follow-up question. Megan, what is our current percentage tree canopy in this regard, total Issaquah acreage?
We did a tree canopy study in 2009, and we are at 51%.
I want to follow up. That's interesting. I was just looking at something that was from the Office of Sustainability Indicators in 2010 that it was 59%. So our tree canopy objectives have gone down. I'm not sure, but I'll let you comment on that, along with a question that I've heard from the public before, and I want to resurface, and that is, how does a city like Issaquah, that within city limits has so much forested land, Tiger Mountain, and other parks and really heavily forested areas, how do we take into account that when we establish what our goal is, which should be, I think, quite different from Bellevue, well, maybe not Bellevue, because Bellevue's got a lot of forested land too, but Redmond and Seattle and Woodinville, you know, how do we take into account our parks? Thank you.
This is Megan. For the first part of that, I believe that the last sustainability indicators report from 2016, I think it was 49%, not 59%, is what I'm remembering, or 48. So then we got up to the 51%. For the second piece, I don't know if I quite caught the question in that. I apologize.
Thank you. Yeah, we're both juggling all our resources here. And let me clarify, it was the sustainability indicators of 2010. 2010 said that we were 59% tree canopy. And the second part of the question was, how does a city like Issaquah adjust its tree canopy objectives or goals in a percentage like other cities do when our city is full of forested parks, thousands of acres of forested parks that other cities don't have? So how does that come into play when we're trying to keep the rest of our city with a strong tree canopy too? Is our percentage higher than other cities, I guess, is another way of putting that.
It is higher than several of the other cities, but you know, each city does have a different landscape, different building patterns and all of that. I think that's something that we are trying to work on in Title 18 and the Climate Action Plan is making sure that we're able to maintain and retain what we have with this 51%. So we're trying to keep the development in the valley floor. We're trying to preserve the areas that we have. The city does do tree planting campaigns as well. So for example, last year, the city planted 10,000 trees in the city in various areas. So we're definitely trying to, you know, improve on that, but also wanting to make sure that we take care of the ones that we have, kind of getting to Commissioner Zaragoza's comment about wanting to make sure that the trees stay healthy so that they're doing the jobs that they need to do, shading, sequestration, and those pieces. I hope that answered your question. I'm not sure if it entirely did.
And thank you, Commissioner Milligan. Commissioner Lewis, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Fall. Commissioner Joy Lewis here. You know, in regards to E, I think Nina had some of my same questions, and so what I want to do is to kind of continue her dialogue in my mouth by saying, you know, when we look at, so it was my understanding that we were at that 51%, right? And so I guess what I'm concerned about is this idea of retaining what we have, I think was the language that you had used, versus, you know, pushing towards increasing and improving, which this document needs to feel forward facing to me. And I think that all that we've given and we know being able to protect our natural systems means that as a community, we need to be setting the bar higher. I don't know if that means changing the 51%. I've always felt it a little bit black box why it was at 51%. I've never quite understood those numbers, but Parks likes to tell us this is good and this is great. And so we go, okay, if this is what you think is all right. But the idea that we're just maintaining a status quo to me doesn't feel necessary and vital in this document. It feels regressive. So while maybe a way to do that is to push for a different tree canopy for that total acreage, maybe it's to have language that talks about how, while this is our the tree canopy, that we have higher expectations moving forward for how we, you know, how we do things. I'm not quite sure, but I definitely felt like E1 was a little light, right, compared to the values of our community. And so I would encourage kind of re-looking at that. And I don't want to sit here saying that I think that we need to actively change that, because again, that tree canopy number feels very, it's something I see all the time, right? Whenever we're reviewing parks documents and things. So it's something that is very normative to me. But when I was hoping that these policies would promote something a little bit more aggressive. And again, I don't know if that means that we need to change that number, but it's something's off right there when we're just talking about retaining what we have. The other thing I felt was missing from E is kind of the concept of a do no harm evaluation of future policies in here. So, you know, not to pick on Richard, but he mentioned 5G. And right now the science is telling us pretty unequivocally that 5G is killing bees. I mean, just rapidly and annihilating bees. I have serious concerns about 5G, right? I think that there's a different and a better way that we can have connectivity and mobility without decimating pollinators. So what I worry about is having economics drive this rather than having the needs that we have in our natural systems. So I was liking the idea of having some sort of policy that talks about really looking at all of our policies through this lens, right? It's not that we have this area of, you know, climate evaluation in our policies, it's that we look at all of our policies through the lens of climate change and the things that are coming down the pipeline that we want to be able to improve, because we know that we have this narrow window to do something about it. So I would like to see a policy that really kind of talks about this do no harm, right? As we're moving forward in our city, if we're doing something that has an evaluation, that there's an upper hand to the environment, if that makes sense. Again, I didn't wordsmith a policy, so if you want me to offline, help with that. But to me, that wasn't coming through, right? And I think that this might be a natural section to talk about what a priority it is. I also was curious if this would be a good place to talk about chemical discharging and banning the use of it. I think that being a progressive city means that we need to talk about people buying Roundup to dump on, you know, a small weed, right? I mean, as a community, we need to start talking about with stormwater management. Well, what are we putting in the ground? Is it okay that I can buy a whole host of chemicals to be able to say I don't like that dandelion, right? I mean, there needs to be some sort of way that we're talking about how we're interacting with our water systems and what we're using, and taking a stand of saying this isn't acceptable in our community. And I think that, you know, in one way we talked about waste earlier, I think talking about chemicals getting into our water system is a really serious issue, especially when we talk about the health of salmonoids in our streams. And I think that E is a natural place to be talking about that. So those are my two suggestions for this. Please feel free to let me know if you think those are totally out of bounds or what you think, Megan.
This is Megan. I think for now, mostly take the comment and kind of digest it. I know we do have some IPM policies in the comp plan. I think it's in a sustainability section which is, I think, right below the climate section. I'm doing this from memory though. So I believe there is policies there. I think we don't have it captured here because it's not directly related to climate, but it is a sustainability policy that is important for our city, for salmon, and something that's also in the stormwater master plan. So I think that's something we've kind of talked about, how big is this climate action plan? Is it the all-inclusive, or are there some things that, are represented other places in the city that aren't in this plan?
Okay, and thank you, Commissioner Lewis. And next person here is Commissioner Boyce.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, no, and I kind of, that's the way I'm feeling about the whole thing is, again, we have other boards and commissions that we're depending on to do their job we're all kind of focusing on our job, but because we've been asked about climate change. One of the things I was wondering, and this goes back to Commissioner Milligan's point, is so if so much of, and I think even Joy had mentioned this, so 51% of the tree canopy is heavily weighted, right, by the forests that we have. Does it make any sense that there might be something more appropriate for like the livable part of the city, whether it's like a prescription or a percentage, right? Because you still have these heat spots in the center of Issaquah. So we're weighting all of our tree canopy on tiger and squawk, and it's wonderful, and we want to keep that. But at the same time, it far outweighs it. You can walk on Gilman and get sunburned within 5 minutes, and there's no shade for you. So I just don't know. Like I said, I mean, it sounds good. I think to Commissioner Lewis's point, I don't really know how 51%. I'm sure the Parks Board does much more work than we're expected to do on that particular subject. I just wonder if anyone's taking into consideration, right? So our forests are so heavily weighted in our formula. And then, like I said, you can walk down Gilman and get sunburn within 5 minutes. And again, I forget these terms because this really isn't my expertise at all. But like sunspots, or not even sunspots. I think Nina had mentioned food deserts. So there's some similar phrase used for like areas that are just getting beat in sweltering heat. And again, like I said, so everyone's patting themselves on the back for 51% coverage. Yet the central Issaquah area and maybe some neighborhoods have almost limited tree coverage because again, it's weighted so far over here. So I don't know if that's being looked at. I'm sure it is by our colleagues on the other boards and commissions. But I don't know, like I said, if that's appropriate here in the climate action plan to make a difference or differentiate between our forests in our actual livable areas where, like I said, so much of it's weighted in areas that we don't live in. Our friendly animal neighbors live in, but not us.
And thank you, Commissioner Boyce. To Commissioner Boyce's comment there, they're heat deserts. In fact, I saw a commercial, or not a commercial, a documentary on heat deserts in East LA, and the lower income neighborhoods they have fewer trees, and therefore they need more resources to keep their houses cool, and therefore they increase their carbon footprint. So maybe having a policy in here that says we need mature tree coverage in neighborhoods. That way people's houses will stay cooler in the summer, and we know that summers are going to get hotter, and that's one way we can reduce our carbon footprint by helping people not use air conditioning in their homes. I would also like to comment though, I noticed that when I walk the city, I do smell weed killer along the Issaquah Creek. So when I'm taking our dogs for a walk and we're walking along the Issaquah Creek, and the Rainier Trail, I can smell the weed killer. So maybe we should be looking at not using weed killer, because we know that weed killer does get into the streams, but also maybe making it more like a bag ban certain pesticides or herbicides like Roundup, which the United States is the only country in the world that actually allows Roundup to be used. If we can ban sell plastic bags in our community, maybe we can ban the sale of Roundup or high risk, and highly toxic herbicides. And I don't know if that would be a separate policy, but I don't see anything in here discussing the use of toxic chemicals and herbicides and pesticides and so on. And I think we should be having some policy language in here that would be appropriate. Okay, so that was my last question, and no one else had any additional questions. Let's go ahead and move on to goal F, which is the last goal, community resilience and well-being. I'll open the floor for questions. Okay, and Commissioner Lewis, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Fall. I saw a serious gap when I was reading this document, and I decided that F was the place for me to put it. So everyone's going to have to be a little bit gentle on my soapbox right now. We love to talk about green energy, right? But the thing is that it actually takes quite a bit of resources to achieve green energy, right? So the mining and extraction of minerals, silver for solar panels. There's a wide array of really detrimental effects on the environment that are going to be happening as we transition to green energy. And the deforestation of hillsides is a common thing that happens with mining. Right now, actually, we are over mining the earth, and right now we're around 82% past a sustainable amount of mining, and that's only going to completely catapult out of control, right? So I think it's really important when we talk about this climate change action plan to be looking at the entire whole of what our actions are. And so I was disappointed to not see that mentioned in this document. And I think that it's important here in F to really talk about plans to transition to green energy needs being accompanied by a planned reduction of aggregate energy use. Reducing our energy demand not only enables a faster transition to renewables, but it also ensures that that transition doesn't trigger a new wave of destruction. And so when we saw that data that our city has actually been using more energy, it's nice to talk about where we get our energy from, but it's vitally important that we talk again about drastically reducing that aggregate energy use. And I know that it's not a popular thing to tell everybody that you can't have an SUV and a McMansion and everything that you want and be able to throw it all away. And what do you mean? I can't just, wish cycle everything away. But this section F is a way for us to actually start setting our intention as a community of something that is more aggressive, as saying, what are we consuming as a community, and what are we actually willing to say is how are we contributing to the problem. So I would like to see something in F that talks about that energy use.
This is Megan. Am I able to? I'll take a minute to respond to that. I think we do have stuff about reducing overall energy use in the building and energy category. So specifically, we're talking about reducing energy use from existing buildings and making sure we're using less in new buildings. So are you saying you also want to see more in around climate resilience in that?
I do. So right now you're automatically going to be using less energy by upgrading to more modern ways, right? Whether you're putting in new windows, but taking away that old infrastructure, right? What I'm talking about is something actually that's more aggressive right now in the renewables community, right? Is the actual discussion of saying how in the industrial world are we using our energy, and how can that actually change? How can we actually not decrease it from being able to upgrade technology, but actually decrease our energy uses? So when we talk about that, Nina's brought up the 15-minute city, right? Richard's been a proponent of how do we make working from home more accessible to more people, right? There's a lot of ways that we can reduce our energy footprint, but I don't see language in these policies that talks about how do we further reduce and be a community that isn't increasing our energy need, right? Because as we continue to grow and have more people, our energy need increases. So we're talking a lot about how we where we get that energy from, and what I'm talking about is actually that aggregate energy use and being able to actually say that we're making an impact on how we change the way that we live as a community. I don't see that represented right now in F. So again, that could be a value system, right, that we decide as a community we don't have, but it's the predominant view right now of saying that in the industrialized world we need to actually change the way that we're interacting in our environment as well.
Thank you. This is Megan. I need to grab my computer cord. I apologize for that. I think I can be about 1 minute, so I'll be right back.
So again, maybe that's something that I'm alone on. I'll be happy to hear from my fellow commissioners, but I will turn it over back to Ron. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lewis. We're going to go ahead, and I've got 2 more people in line here. I guess we'll just camp out until she gets back. She's probably only going to be 60 seconds. Excellent. Let's go ahead and move on to the next commissioner. Commissioner Milligan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Fall, and thank you, Commissioner Lewis. Move over on that soapbox. I am gladly joining you. I'm so glad you brought that up. Be bold, girl. That's great. The declaration that renewable energies aren't that green because of the mining damage on our planet is something that people want to hide their eyes from. And it is a shame. And the only really green thing to do is to use less of everything. Indeed, you are right on target, Commissioner Lewis. And maybe you're looking at this section, but for that moment that we had, that quiet moment we had, went back and looked at section A. And maybe in section A, there's an opportunity to make a bold statement that says, we know that even renewable energies aren't green enough for Issaquah. The only thing that's green enough is using less. having a less of an impact on our planet. Maybe there's a way of putting a stake in the ground like that. So I'm standing up here on the soapbox with you, Joe. Where are we going next? Thank you.
And thank you, Commissioner Milligan. And I like what both of you have said about that. It's maybe we should look at it a little bit differently. Instead of focusing all of our efforts on renewable energy, focus on renewable energy, but using less. And with the advancements of LEDs, we think, oh, we can just leave lights on and it's only like 2 or 3 watts, but it adds up. Okay, Richard Zaragoza, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Richard Zaragoza. So my questions are around the actual climate emergencies and being prepared for that, being resilient for that. Is there, are we talking about funds when, from property damage, from issues that are coming up from climate? How are, do we have plans to help when there is, flooding issues, when, these trees are damaged by, heat waves like we just had? I know I lost a good portion of the garden in my place. How do we see that actually happening as far as like helping the community kind of bounce back when these climate emergencies happen and hopefully not consecutively? So
This is Megan. Yes, I think that having actions in the plan that are both things that the city is doing to help prepare for the climate emergency, some of which cities already doing, such as setting up cooling centers when it's really hot. The city also just hired a new emergency manager who will be looking at emergencies in general, climate or non, but incorporating a lot of new pieces. And we also already have a hazardous plan. So if there is wildfires and other emergencies, then there are plans in place, but this is kind of also putting that climate lens on it. So making sure that we know these things are becoming more of a risk. We're going to be seeing more flooding, more heat waves. So preparing that, the cooling center is not going to be a once a summer thing anymore. We're going to need more established processes for being ready to do those sorts of things more. And then also working with the community to help community members understand what's going to be happening more and help them get themselves prepared for it as well.
Okay, and thank you, Commissioner Zaragoza and Megan Curtis Murphy. I am not seeing any additional questions, and we went through the 6 goals here. So, Kristen, let's go ahead and open up to public comment. Do we have any members from the public that would like to speak tonight?
We have 1 hand raised, and if anyone else would like to speak, please raise your virtual hand. I have 2 hands raised. And if for some reason you can't find the virtual hand, because it's not always easy, just type a comment to me, to the host, and I will hopefully see that. So first up, Connie Marsh. Connie, I am making you a panelist and you are unmuted. You can turn your camera on if you would like.
Huh. I just wanted to see if it would actually work. Oh, it does. Look at that. Oops, I didn't clean behind me though. So I've actually been to several of these meetings, and there's a few things I find disconcerting or are not very functional in the process. As a person shouldn't have to go to the meeting over and over to know if they have been heard, I think that a table of the comments should follow along with this process, with all of the cumulative comments that have happened at all of these meetings, it is unfair to say, well, we're going to give that to you all in the end, because we don't know if we've been heard or not. And so when I see there's a couple of changes, and I don't see all the hundreds of changes that I heard that I thought were great from the other meetings, it makes me feel like you're just going with it. And the example is the 51% tree canopy. Universally, no one has liked staying with the 51% tree canopy, yet you still bring it up like it is the thing. And so here we go. We spent another half an hour of time talking about the darn tree canopy when everybody has basically said we need more than that. So I would like to know what the progress is as we go along, so everyone doesn't have to have the same conversation multiple times. So, given that, I am going to start with okay, and because my brain is weaving around this differently, the comprehensive plan should give you the vision of what this climate action is. And a lot of what you all are talking about are vision statements. What is the end point that our community should have on climate action? Should we be working toward reduction and greening up the city and ensuring great habitat for humans and animals? Is that our end goal? And the last time our land use section of our comprehensive plan was done was 2015. So it is old. It does not have this visionary language in it for climate change or climate action or who Issaquah wants to be. And I heard you guys were awesome tonight. You talked about this a lot. Like, what are we really going for? What is Issaquah's stance? We're Issaquah. And that is the conversation that is missing here, because we don't really know where we're going. We're following King County, we're following the state, but very little is who are we, who do we want to be, and how are we going to bring our community along, which is what I think this climate action plan is supposed to be doing. But I think it's missing the mark in a few ways. A lot of it is not in English. A lot of it is in jargon. Nobody really knows what those words mean. If a common person read that language, they would be doing like what Ron said. It's like, well, I didn't really understand that that's what it meant, but now that you really explain it. So there's a lot of people who are used to writing policy in town and they use more English. So in our regular comprehensive plan, we actually use English more than the jargon that is in this. So I would like to see a hand go toward turning this language into common man English so that people could actually understand it. And then the other part that is missing is our failures. Because we have done many of these things before, yet we have failed. We have worked toward an emission goal, it has failed. We've worked toward a garbage goal, it has failed. And we keep integrated pest management, which is how to prevent chemicals from getting in our systems. Nobody knows what that means, but that is only a municipal plan. And ours is terrible. It's the only one worse is the school district. We use more poison in this town than you can even imagine. Failure. So until we see why we have failed, we're going to have a hard time figuring out how to make it better. And we have yet to have an honest conversation on those topics. So I think you covered trees. I think you covered a lot of these things that the difficulty of policy, and we still have this problem in our comp plan, is you need a policy that is broad enough to cover what you think you want to do, but not so broad that it lets you do nothing. And we have had that problem in our town a lot. And so you need to find that language. These policies are so broad, you could do nothing, no problem. If somebody came into this town and wasn't interested, you could do absolutely nothing and you'd be fine. You could just check it off the list. So,
Can you use for 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
5 minutes, should I stop? Oh, okay, I can keep going. So the master mobility plan does not connect with the common man in town. You noticed in the The survey that they did, the number one thing was we don't like congestion. And our mobility master plan does not address congestion at all. And so until you get the people to actually feel like doing something in the mobility master plan, they're going, what are you talking about? Nobody's going to ride bikes. Nobody has a sidewalk. You don't have the majority in line with that. And so you need an education, vast education, because there is such a divide and nobody is bothered to conquer that bridge. As you can see from the survey, I'm not making it up. And then one last thing, actually two, drove to California. There's no way you could drive an electric car easily to California and back. We have I-90 going through our town. We have that same infrastructure commitment if we want to go to electric vehicles that needs to happen in Issaquah because we have an interstate going through our town. So we are going to need to provide those services for those people wanting to do long distance travel. And then I think the action plan should be about strategy and implementation. The comprehensive plan language should be the policies and the goals. And those two topics need to be divided up when you discuss this, because a climate action plan is a strategic and implementation plan. It is not the comprehensive plan, policies, goals, and visions. And right now it's trying to do all of those. And I think that's creating a lot of confusion. So I think if you divide that up a little bit, you might have more success. Okay, sorry, I talked a lot. But maybe if you guys can, you're doing great. PPC, you're doing great. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. That was awesome. Kristen, do we have an additional person? Additional public here that wants to speak?
We do. We have one more, Julian Mydell, and I'm going to make you a panelist right now. And when I find your name, there you go. You are unmuted, and you can turn on your camera if you would like.
Good evening, commissioners. I just wanted to make a few comments about what you were discussing today, mostly just in response to some of the comments you guys made. So, of course, I'm very interested in transportation and land use policy and how they're very interlinked with each other. And I think that should be the center of the discussion as you go forward. And they have to be intertwined with each other. You can't consider them separately. So we need to look at making it so that the city's codes can better accommodate a wide diversity of housing in the city, and houses that are closer to each other and where people can actually walk or bike or take the bus to their place of work or school or shopping. So we need to look at that. And for bikeways in particular, I think it's more important to just have lots of bikeways, just like, shoulders, instead of separated bikeways. Separated bikeways are kind of useless when they don't go anywhere. I would think of the 62nd Street roundabout, for example. That little bikeway, I don't think anyone really uses that because it really doesn't go anywhere. So when you're considering placing bikeways somewhere, you have to consider where it's going and make sure that actually is a throughput. And then, of course, I didn't hear about parking minimums. I think that should be another thing that we look at. I think there was a study released recently which was basically saying if you have parking minimums, that basically induces car use to the place of destination. I think that, of course, you can lag this option after you put in more bike lanes and accommodate non-car use. But I think it's really important to look at parking minimums also because of impervious surfaces and the urban heat island effect. And that's also where the tree canopy issue comes into play too, because it's about putting the trees in places across the city, not just in the mountains, kind of like what Commissioner Voice was saying. And another comment about renewables. I think utility scale renewables are more effective in terms of price and volume. And it basically would also accommodate our affordability problem too, because mandating or encouraging more solar on rooftops, especially in Issaquah, where it's cloudy 7 months of the year at least, won't be very useful for our affordability problem. And finally, I think the city should also elaborate its position on the landfill incineration issue. That'll become more prominent as we go into 2020s, 2030s. And that's all my comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mydell. That was excellent. And Kristen, is that it for the public comment for this evening?
No one else has indicated that they would like to speak.
Excellent. Okay, so we will go ahead and close public comment, and we'll open it back up for commissioner discussion. And I'm not seeing any discussions coming up, so I'm going to go ahead and go first. I would like to go back to, it is goal number E, natural systems and water resources. In E1 specifically, achieve 51% tree canopy. I want to dive deeper into that. Why can't we have a higher percentage of tree canopy? Why can't we, to Joy's point, why can't we esteem for something better than that? Say, what is sustainable? 60% or 75%? What can we actually go for? Why settle on 51%? If we're already at 51%, why can't we try and grow that? Now, to Jason's conversation about looking at Tiger Mountain is all DNR. That's all logging. So the state forest actually sells Tiger Mountain off for logging. The western side of Tiger is slotted to be logged eventually. So they're hitting the southeastern section of Tiger now, which is where all the bike trails are, and they're clear cutting out a huge area. What happens when the DNR sells the rights for West Tiger to be logged? We're relying on that tree forest to be part of our canopy, and it's all for sale. So I'd like to have a conversation more about protecting their tree canopy that we see, because that affects Issaquah, but also more importantly, because it's a environmental filter for us. So how can we protect what is on Tiger? How can we grow the 51%? And then my next question is, how do we reduce consumption of toxic landscaping materials? Because I think it's important for us to reduce the stress on the salmon by reducing the amount of herbicides and pesticides we put into the streams. Not only that, but because they're expecting us to get warmer with less flows in the streams, it's going to put more pressure on the salmon. So maybe we can't do anything about necessarily the stream flows, but we can do something about the toxicity, the toxic chemicals that are going into the streams. And looks like, so that's it for me. I'm going to go ahead and release the floor. Commissioner Voice has a comment.
Thank you, Chair Fowl. So just to follow up on your question, and maybe Ms. Curtis Murphy could tell me, but my understanding is that the city really doesn't control forest management of our own mountains. That's handled through Department of parks because it's escaping me now, but my understanding is we don't even, other than utilize it, we're actually not in control of them. So it's kind of interesting how it gets used as part of our canopy percentage, but yet we don't really have any control over them. And I guess that would kind of speak to what Ron's saying as Commissioner Fowl, Chair Fowl, about how, again, they can sell the rights off to certain people they deem necessary at that point. Is that correct? Do I have that correct? Somebody?
This is Megan. I'm not sure exactly which, what percentage of the hillsides is within city limits, but you're correct that most of it is either King County or state. The city does have some that that's within our boundaries, and we do have our our Green Issaquah partnership and some that we work to enhance and protect that. But a lot of it is owned by others.
So I guess part of our strategic, maybe our strategic would be to, and I know people are already doing this, but to apply the lead foot to Commissioner Franz and other people that will hear our voices loud and clear. The second, my understanding too, is that Puget Sound Energy, the Green Direct program, is only available to municipalities, as you had mentioned. So again, another opportunity to lobby PSC, but ultimately, like you said, is they're going to phase it out within the next 4 years, I believe it was that I heard tonight. They have little incentive to move quicker than that to provide it for residents. So I guess what I'm saying is I hear a lot of people talking about jumping forward, being a leader, all of these things, and it's all wonderful. But at the same time, that's going to take city resources. So I think one of the reasons we're using some of our regional numbers and percentages is because, again, that's where we get resources regionally, King County, state, because again, whenever we decide to take the lead, that will come from city coffers. There might be some ways you can get subsidies or grants, but it is an expensive prospect. And again, in a time when the city also has many other situations that it needs to take care of. So that's just one comment. And then I also think it kind of makes us less competitive with some of our neighbors. So again, I think there's some wonderful things that we can do, but I think it's all kind of in perspective. I'm sure everybody would love to sign off on everything that's green and everything that's wonderful, but just kind of realizing, okay, so it is a regional thing, because again, we can jump ahead of our partners all we want, but that will come out of city coffers. It won't come out of state and county funding. So that's my piece. That's what I'm thinking. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Voice. Commissioner Zaragoza, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Richard Zaragoza. So my comments, maybe it's more of a question, is around same thing, tree canopy. In the residential areas, like the Highlands, a lot of builders will choose smaller trees because they don't rip up the sidewalks as they grow large. But of course, they don't have as much coverage. They're not ever, they don't get large enough to shade a home or anything like that, especially not the townhomes. Can we, pick species that are fast growing, that are large and will shade these areas, especially in places like Safeway, the supermarkets, they redid the trees. They're very small trees. Can we, request larger species? Maybe there's some changes to their parking lot design so that, the future damage is mitigated, but, so that those canopies are larger than they are today, and when we do have these builders come in, are we requesting numbers of trees, or are we requesting, canopy size? Like, how does that actually work? Does this so much of that parking lot need to be covered by canopy, or are we asking them to have so many trees per square foot?
So this is Kristen, Lisa, and if I could jump in just a little bit real quick. I do know that we have our landscaping section of Title 18 coming up, and in a landscaping meeting that we had the other day with our consultants, we talked about identifying types of trees and that Issaquah needs that do the best here, that are can't think of the right word. They are from here. So native, there you go. But different kinds of trees like that. So that is a conversation that you all will be having with the landscape plan. As far as, well, I'll probably get the next one wrong, but I was going to talk about what we require. And we require impervious surfaces. I don't know, and amount of impervious surface and amount of pervious surface. And I don't know that we require a certain number of trees, just that it is pervious. And Minnie, you may be able to answer, maybe able to answer that better. Maybe Megan can. Either one of you.
Yeah, I can give it a shot.
Oh, wait, sorry. Actually, we have our other, yay, coming in long range planner online who just says that in commercial areas, we do trees per stall. Sorry, Minnie, I throw that in there. Okay. You can keep going. That was what I got.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, we'll take a deeper dive into the landscaping standards and tree regulations that's currently scheduled for September 9th. So we'll give you a lot of information about what's under the current code, what are some gaps from the policy standpoint, where we want some regulations. So, the interesting part is now that you've had this climate action in your minds, you've had this discussion, and then in the Title 18 update, you can really kind of get it into an actionable item in terms of at least for new development. So we'll provide all those details for you in terms of how most cities regulate them by perimeter landscaping along the property or landscape parking lot landscaping. It's generally per stall, like Valerie, who is on the call here, was prompting us. But there can be various ways of doing it. It has to be easy to implement also. So if you make a canopy size, it's sometimes difficult to get those in the landscaping plans and measure that's how it's going to work. A lot of times those can be regulated by the type of tree. It has to be the right size, right type, in the right location. If the science tells you that in a 5-foot median strip, if you plant the wrong kind of tree, that's going to give you more problem too. So it's more complicated. We'll take a deeper dive into the trees and landscaping soon.
And okay, perfect. Thank you. And thank you, Commissioner Zaragoza. Commissioner Lewis, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Fall. Commissioner Joy Lewis. My question, Megan, is kind of my comment questions is kind of about resources, and what I was hoping in this document, and I feel like I didn't get, is trying to understand how these policies that have been put together are going to impact the city for integration, and basically like how have we all of a sudden decided that we have been allocated some type of funds to be able to do this? Are we just saying these are our ideological plans and goals because we have the desire to be able to start this process, but being able to actually move forward on the action part of the climate action plan is going to be a little bit more of a question mark. And when we start talking about the finances behind these policies, I'm curious too about plans for offsetting greenhouse gases for, basically, are we going to start paying to offset what we're doing? Are we going to start, living by our policies? And kind of that conversation I brought up before, kind of the net neutral, net zero, right? Of being able to say, like, where is it that we're going to be going as far as a resource allocation on this? That's a question for you, Megan.
Thank you. I had a little bit of background noise during some of that, so I did not catch the full thing. I apologize if you could summarize it.
I can. I'm sorry. So basically, I'm curious how these policies are going to impact the city as far as like integration, right? So how do we have funds been allocated? Is it just kind of like when we put out our transportation plan, we're like, here's all the places that we need to have action, but we're still waiting to see if we get funding and what's going to happen, right? We have these plans that are 10, 20, 40 years down the road. to deal with current congestion issues. Instead, or do we actually, what is our plan for our plan, right? How do we actually implement the action part? What is the funding part to be able to put our, effectively put our money where our mouth is? And what I'm curious then is to actually be having a conversation of the city is saying, are we going to be paying to offset our greenhouse gases right now? Or are we going to be having these conversations of net zero versus neutral? Is what I'm trying to understand is the resources part of implementing these policies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the city does annual budgeting right now, and so we have resources. We're in the budget process right now, so we're putting resources towards implementation of the climate action plan for next year. In each of the budget cycles, we'll be doing that. Some might be under sustainability, other things. A lot of the more transportation actions could be in public works or through the transportation improvement plan. So I would say there's different ways that it will be funded and implemented. One of the pieces that we're going to be bringing into this plan is an implementation plan. So determining kind of who lead departments are, and then they'll be budgeting for it and planning for it in their processes.
Okay, thanks, Megan. So hopefully when we see this again as part of the comp plan, we're going to have a better understanding of those next pieces. Maybe is that feasible?
So we are still in the process of developing the plan. So the implementation plan will likely come after that, but we will have the goals and policies at the next meeting, as well as the actions, draft actions, which I think will give more of that kind of next level of detail about what's going to be going into the policies. I do not think we'll have the implementation plan at that next meeting.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I do only have, I think, one more thing that I forgotten to mention is that I don't see anything in our policy right now. Obviously, we've been having conversations about tree retention, but I don't see anything about bogs specifically as a carbon sink. And basically, I think there needs to be a policy for protecting our natural carbon filtration and storage systems. So obviously, it's kind of on our mind because we've all been diving into Title 18 recently. But I think it's interesting to actually look at it as a separate issue with our climate action plan, is to say, how are we in our city making sure that we're preserving the natural places that are our natural carbon sinks, and would like to see a policy about that. Thank you for your help on all this, Megan.
Great. And thank you, Commissioner Lewis. Commissioner Zaragoza, you have a comment? Go ahead, and you have the floor.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Richard Zaragoza, one last comment, question. Are we, or have we already mapped out neighborhoods and zones that are at higher risk for climate issues, and not only areas and communities, but individual community members like elderly people who might have a little more difficult times during heat waves? I'm on the 5th floor of Atlas, and the last heat wave, the power went out, and it was pretty intense. I can imagine that if there's some elderly people in the building, knowing who they are and what resources they might need before another one hits would be good things to know. So is there some kind of census or something like that that can or is happening? Thanks.
Yes, this is Megan. So I think a lot of that work happens in our with our human services team. I know they are looking directly at demographics and using that information to help inform the community needs assessment that they're working on. There are some new tools that have come out that are really neat, looking at various environmental impacts by demographics. So I've seen a few of those, and in general, some of those areas in Issaquah are along like the I-90 corridor. So we do have some of that information. I think we're taking it kind of at a little bit of a higher level, not quite to the exact mapping, but making sure that we are incorporating equity into the plan and really focusing some actions on our most vulnerable populations and people who may not be able to afford air conditioning, or people older people that you mentioned that might be more susceptible to that. So I don't think we're quite at the map detail for this, but definitely taking that information into consideration.
Okay, thank you, Commissioners Zaragoza and Megan Curtis Murphy. I have two last comments here. I do want to, I think, roll back our conversation to ask the commissioners for policies that are missing from this document that we're looking at now, because that was one of the questions in the beginning of our meeting. I did pull out two that I think are missing that were talked about recently. One is to promote the growth of natural carbon sinks. To Joy's point, that might be something we want to add to this policy. This is a question to the commissioners. And then the second one is some sort of policy language that moves us towards zero use and sales of toxic landscaping chemicals. Is that something that we can promote within this? Is it something that commissioners think that we should? And so I want to open the floor to the commissioners for those two questions for feedback. And we have Commissioner Lewis.
Thank you, Chair Fall, and thank you always for keeping us on track and making sure that staff gets what they need. That's because that's what we're here to do. And so I guess my question would be for Megan is that I think I've definitely suggested at least 6 policies tonight. And so what I'm kind of hoping is that Megan has agreed with all of them, I'm sure. But as this is developed, and the next time we see it, right, is being able to see that feedback of what's not there, right? So if Megan would like us to keep going, I'm sure we can reiterate, but I feel like we've suggested some things, and so I kind of, unless she wants to say she wants more specific language, I'm guessing we'd give her quite a bit to chew on, as far as suggesting those missing policies. But I guess I would love to hear from Megan as to see if there's anything she's still looking for from us tonight.
This is Megan. I think there's been a lot of great input, but if there's any any thoughts about what is final things that are missing, because I think the next time we bring this, it will probably be those final policies. So I wouldn't want to miss the opportunity to add something in now that would not be added in later.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner Lewis. Thank you, Megan Curtis Murphy. Jason Voice, you have the floor.
Great, thank you, Chair Fowl. And yeah, to echo Commissioner Lewis's point, great job keeping us all on task. Two things real quickly is I thought the feedback from the public was fantastic. I love the charts you guys are making. To a previous caller, I'm not sure if we're being able to see this matrix that you guys lay out. So we're definitely getting their feedback, but it's a shame if they don't know that their feedback is being heard, because I've got quite a few pages of emails that show exactly what people are saying in my packet. So I don't know if there's a way we can help facilitate that, because it's definitely getting to us. But yeah, it'd be a real shame if they don't know that, and then they keep coming to meetings thinking there's no impact, because I thought some of the emails were fantastic. I thought some of the things that were sent with the packet were great. Like I said, we can go back to trees. Why not? Let's do trees again. Going back to like using the right tree, right? So you can go down Gilman and see where the roots have completely busted up the sidewalk. So yeah, there was another gentleman that had mentioned, why don't we have a repository of situations where we know this didn't work? Instead of 15 years later, we try to plant the same tree in the same hole with the same width. And everybody goes, what? So yeah, having like a repository. But again, the comments were fantastic, and it'd be nice to let them know that they are getting across. As far as the actual discussion, I think Chair Fowl, I think that was pretty much the feeling that I got was pretty much everybody piping in. So hopefully, Ms. Curtis Murphy was able to make out the last 2 hours about basically trying to toughen up some of this language. I came into it, and I still kind of think you guys are looking for the higher elevation. I don't know if we're there yet. I don't know if we're going to get the opportunity. I hope so, but more targeted actions to come. So I think there was a couple people that have made comments like this should be a part of climate change, or this should be a part of Part F. And I think those are appropriate. I don't know right now if that's what you guys really want, is to actually discuss action items. So again, that was the way I took it. So I think a lot of the suggestions were great. And then as far as Ron's second question, using harsh chemicals, I don't know if there's a way, I don't think it would be appropriate myself to ask certain stores to ban the use of certain fertilizers that are completely legal. But what you could do is have the municipality move away from them. And that definitely could be something that is easy. It's pretty, I can't imagine there's a big cost detriment there. So you could have the municipality go away from using those. You can do it in your land use agreements. I think I revert back to that same email that talked about, okay, so you put up a wooden fence, but now you have to come back every 3 years, So is there a way we can write that in for commercial buildings, municipal buildings? And again, land use developments for our bigger construction projects. Are you going to be able to ban someone in Old Town who goes down to Home Depot and picks up poor fertilizer or poor weed killer? Probably not. But there are ways we can definitely tighten up, I would think. And that would be another area where the city could lead. And again, build that into commercial agreements, land or development agreements with bigger builders, things like that. So to question number 2, I guess that's what I would say. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Voice. And Commissioner Zaragoza.
Thank you, Chair. Richard Zaragoza. I wanted to just respond to the chair and say, yes, I think bubbling up those 2 topics would be great. Carbon sinks, I think that could be a section in itself. And I'm on the fence with banning, but I think certainly education and reduction and use of those types of toxic things sounds great. And if that could be bubbled up as an action in itself, I think that would be great. So that's it.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Commissioner Zaragoza. And that is it for this evening for our goals, unless there's anything additional conversation to be had for that. I'm going to hand the floor over to Kristen to go ahead and discuss reports.
Thank you. This is Kristen Leeson, Senior Planner. And before I move on, I do just want to say one thank you, Megan, very much. Two, some of the things that you brought up regarding chemicals and pesticides and trees, we could throw everything in the climate action, but Gary Schmeck is coming on October 14th to talk about the surface and stormwater plan. So that's a good time to talk about chemicals there as well. And trees, like I mentioned, is going to be in landscape. So while we would love for this to be all encompassing here, we will be able to address it in other places as well. That's the intent of some of those. So Megan, I'm going to dismiss you. Night. You all, many of you probably don't know this, but Megan is on the East Coast right now, so it's 12 o'clock her time. So bless her heart. Okay, so reports. I know that the sign code went to the council study session on July 22nd. I was not there, but maybe Minnie has a report from that. Minnie?
Good evening, commissioners. So yes, the council did a study session, and it is primed up for a public hearing happening in September for adoption. So I think the feedback we took from you all was you didn't want to see it back again, but you wanted community to weigh in. So we did relay that over to council, and they will be holding a public hearing before adopting the final signed code. It's changed a little bit from the time you saw it. A lot of it is in terms of the predictability, how it looks, feels. There are more tables in it. So that was sort of what the work we did with the Title 18 Ad Hoc Committee. So that's getting ready for public hearing and adoption in early September. Beyond that, we had included in your packet a rolling list of comments that we get from the public, and those were for Title 18. We committed to you all that we, as new comments come in, we will keep them updated in the table format and produce them to you. So we've only included the new comments that came in from June through August that were not included in the previous packet. So I think we will continue that method unless you tell us otherwise. At each meeting related to Title 18, we will produce only the new comments in the table, but we are maintaining all of them comprehensively. So when the official public hearing on that topic will be, we will have a more complete response for each one of those related per topics. As you see in your packet, they're broken up by those 6 larger groups. So the landscaping and open space is one, and then natural environment is one, and so on. Beyond that, I think it's late in the hour. We had Kristen had produced a little training thing in terms of the question keeps coming up: what's a vision? What's a goal? What's a policy? And what's a code for Title 18? So we're happy to email that presentation over to you if you want. I think that'll help clarify some of these discussions as we get deeper into Title 18, just understanding that's where the conversation today was all about actionable items. And so sometimes, when we're debating the policy discussion, you're at 50,000 feet level, but when you're talking about the code, you're going to be at a much finer grain. So we can send you that presentation and answer any, that should help answer some of those questions. What's a vision? What's a goal? What's a policy? And there's some examples Kristen put together. That's all I have. In terms of the next steps for Title 18, we heard loud and clear that the meeting on July 22nd was a marathon meeting. So we don't want to repeat that. And we're looking at dividing up some of the topics into multiple meetings, which then means there are going to be more meetings, but it'll hopefully will lead to more meaningful discussions. On the environmental topics, we're going to come back to you on August 26th to continue the discussion that was started on July 22nd. And we've sent you a survey. If you all can fill that out by the 16th, then we will include your responses in the packet for August 26th. On September 9th we're going to bring back open space, landscaping and trees with Parks Board in attendance. And on August 26th, you'll have Environmental Board jointly attending and doing the conversation with you about the topics we introduced on July 22nd. That's all I have. I'll turn it over to you, Kristen.
No, I was going to sort of cover the schedule as well and just let you know that we pulled up. So yes, we do have more meetings. We'll send that in the next packet, and the schedule's changed a lot since the last packet. And we will put that in your next packet and talk about it at the next meeting and make sure it's going to work with you all. I do want to know, originally, this is kind of a 2-part question. Originally, we had scheduled a public hearing for the comprehensive plan. It would start on September 23rd, and we would continue it through October 14th. And we've done that the past couple of years. But I think you all may have seen an email today saying that a rezone request was withdrawn. So then, aside from sort of annual updates with jobs and housing, that kind of thing, we have the climate change. So climate change I guess my first question, would you all like to see that again before the public hearing? Which is on October 14th.
Commissioner Voice here. So are you suggesting, Ms. Leeson, that we could take the climate action plan and then actually put that in the meeting that was meant for September 9th?
Yes, I didn't complete that thought, did I? Yes. And my thought now is that we would just have the public hearing on October 14th, but we can bring back the climate change plan on the 23rd, potentially, if you all would like to see that. And really, it's not the entire plan. The intent is, the goals and the policies. And as Megan said, she can include the action items if that will help as well.
I can only speak for myself, but yeah, I think it's something as meaningful to the community as this. Yeah, I'd like to see it again.
Okay. I see lots of head nodding, thumbs ups. Okay. So I've kind of already put that into the schedule so we can do that. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I think that's, oh no, I have one more. Let me change something really quickly. I am really, really happy. So for a while, I have been the long range planner for the city. And now one of our current person who's been a current planner will also be working part-time with me in long range planning. And her name is Valerie Porter. There she is. And we also have Stephen Padua, who he's been our transportation planner, will also be joining our group. So it's going to be really cool. So Valerie, do you want to say anything? This is Valerie Porter, everyone.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to say hi, put a name to a face. I don't have a lot to say other than I'm really excited to be working with you guys.
I think it'll be great because she was in the background. She can be she's so familiar with current planning. You've been here 4 or 5 years and she can say things like, oh no, this is what we require. So she knows the code better than I do. So instead of, I'm not sure, I'll have to look, Valerie's usually going to know the answer. So it'll be great.
Welcome to the team.
Thank you.
We'll break you in gently. Okay, that sounds like it's it. Is that it from everybody? Any last
That is it from
thoughts? Okay, so we're going to adjourn the meeting at 9:13. Excellent. Have a good night, y'all.